Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our virtual meeting of the Bylaws and Policy Committee of the Lake Bluff Public Library Board of Trustees. I'd like to start by calling this meeting to order at 7:02 p.m. Do I have a volunteer to take minutes for today's meeting? Allie, thank you. Thanks, Allie. All right, so next I will move on to roll call. Trustee Graziano.
Here.
Trustee Friedeman.
Here.
Trustee Zaute.
Here.
Okay, thank you all. Welcome. And we do have a quorum for our Bylaws and Policy Committee meeting tonight. The first item on the agenda is the election of the chair of the Bylaws and Policy Committee. This is the first meeting of the Bylaws and Policy Committee since the last board meeting's action where we moved and changed this board committee from ad hoc to a standing committee. This is also the first meeting in the new fiscal year of this board committee. And so as per process, we do elect a chair of every board committee. And so with that, I'd like to open the floor for any nominations, self-nominations, or discussion for the election of chair of the Bylaws and Policy Committee. Really quick before I do that, I'll say that the chair of this committee is responsible for providing report outs to the full board during monthly board meetings and works directly with the library director on preparing the agenda and following up any additional work in between meetings. There may be other projects or work that the chair elects to themselves to take forth as part of this role in the committee. So with that, I will defer to any discussion or nominations.
Just one clarifying question. Is this the entire committee as it's constituted right now?
This is, and the
Okay.
only exception to that is President Bonnie Shaw. As board president, the president is able to participate and attend any committee meeting. She was invited and was interested, but had a conflict tonight. And so this committee has membership of these three individuals as the full committee. Thanks, Matt.
Is anyone interested?
I would be happy to throw my hat in the ring for it, unless anyone has a strong interest in the position.
Allie, thank you. I just heard a self-nomination from Allie Friedeman. Any other discussion, comments? Matt, I think you were about to say something as well.
Well, I was just going to ask, is anyone interested in being the chair? Yeah. Allie answered that for us.
Thank you, Allie. Any discussion of the nomination? I'm not officially a standing member of the committee. I'm the liaison of the library, but I'll just add to the discussion that in my initial conversations with getting to know Allie and her experience prior to being elected on this board, I think that this is a really strong fit for you, and I would be very supportive in whoever is elected for chair, but also supportive of your election of chair.
Thank you.
Okay, hearing no further discussion, I will, and any other nominations? This is some of that, formal stuff. So with that, I'm going to move to a vote for Alexandra Friedeman for the chair of the Bylaws and Policy Committee. This will be a roll call vote. And so just answer aye or yes or no, or aye or nay, whatever you're comfortable with. Trustee Graziano.
Aye.
Trustee Zaute.
Aye.
Trustee Friedeman.
Aye.
The ayes have it. And congratulations and thank you to Allie Friedeman, who is officially our new chair of the Bylaws and Policy Committee. Yay!
Yay, good job.
Thank you,
Thank
Ally.
you so much. All right. Moving on to the next item in our agenda is a brief discussion of the prioritization of policy review for fiscal year 23-24 of this committee. And in doing so, I prepared for just a visual right now, a not so brief list of what myself and staff and other committees have recommended since my onboarding at the library in January. I just want to walk through this really quickly, and then we can open the floor for discussions and decisions about what work this committee will take on this fiscal year. So the top two priority policies that you all have had for this meeting for review that I, as director, and then staff would like to see move forward as soon as possible is the meeting room policy and the public comment policy. And I have memos about those two as we move forward with that discussion. The other thing that I wanted to add to this group, and Allie, especially for the context for you, there was a special topics committee that formed as a result of an incident that happened in 2022 in the fall with a member of the public's child in their supervision, viewing inappropriate content of a computer screen that another adult in the library was using. And because of that, there was community feedback, and the board, I think in great leadership with our former president, Kathy Meyerhoff, formed a special topics committee to address this issue. That committee met frequently. It was represented, we had a representative of the community and the library. And just recently, the committee ended their work and we're finalizing the report and recommendations of that committee to the full board. One of their recommendations is, and you will see in this report when it's finalized, a review and update of the following policies. And so when I was onboarded in this position, I updated myself on what had happened, and in working with the committee and reviewing our own policies, I realized that there were a variety of our own policies that would be affected or that are affected with situations like this. And if we were to respond to the community because of this incident in a way that there's interest, one of the recommendations from the community is an update to our policies. And so these are the 4 policies that the Special Topics Committee recommends we review: the computer use policy, the safe child policy, the wireless network policy, usage policy, and the library user conduct policy. And so with that, I just wanted to share context about that committee and the work that it's recommending to this committee. On top of this, I know I've emailed this committee already about a couple of other things. And we've discussed in the previous formation of the board, there are many inconsistencies with the current personnel policy, with how the organization is run with its employees. There are many areas that the personnel policy needs to be updated. First and foremost, with the recent legislation mandating all part-time employees receive an element of prorated personal time, we do need to review the personnel policy and actually institute that change in our policy so that all employees receive paid time off in a prorated fashion to comply with the new state statute. There are increased, as we've seen at our library, increased requests and reconsideration requests for materials. And so our collection development policy is over 5 years old. And in a recent review because of a patron comment, I shared with the previous board that our current collection development policy doesn't address misinformation, conspiracy theorists, and there are a couple of other topics that a lot of public libraries address directly in their collection development policy and talk about how those types of materials are addressed in the collection. And in general, just with the increase of requests for reconsideration, it's important to have a very strong collection development policy to provide transparency to the community about our ordering processes and priorities. And then probably the least prioritized policy of them all, but still one that I think needs attention, is the community bulletin board policy. Our current bulletin board policy is not in line with what our current practice is. And I think we need to strengthen the wording there a little bit to clarify what the role of that bulletin board policy is so that we can more effectively communicate to staff and the public why we say no to some things and why we accept other things as a way to promote free community events. So I struggled with even putting everything to this list, given that it's very long. My own personal opinion is that I don't know if we can prioritize all of this in one fiscal year. I don't know if that's possible, especially because something such as the collection development policy requires a lot of work from staff. It is a very lengthy policy, and I think with any policy review, we want to do our due diligence at the staff end of things and at the trustee end of things to make sure that it is as effective and clear as possible. The other element of this is that all policies, after they are drafted and before approval to the board, are sent to our lawyer for final review before the board of trustees votes on it to implement and approve the policy. So that does take time, but not a lot of time, but there could be back and forth between legal representation and the library about elements of the policy. It's a lot of context, so I just want to open the floor to any reflections or further discussion. I'll leave the list up for your review.
Yeah, and looking at this, I think there are certain things we want to prioritize next after the two we're going to discuss tonight. And personnel policy, as it relates to PTO, that's not optional, and that is a legislative requirement. So that needs to go to the top of the list. I would encourage that our computer use policy, and probably dovetailing off of that, the wireless network usage, and then the library user conduct policy. Just having heard some of the horror stories from when we did that canvas of other libraries, just to be in front of that if we do have an issue, there's no question about what is acceptable. That would be my recommendations here, open to obviously any other feedback.
Just highlighting those as Matt's talking about them so that you all can see which ones he's referencing. Thank you, Matt.
Yep.
Other discussions?
Renee, did the special topics committee, did they have suggestions for the updates, or they just chose these as the ones that should be updated?
The library staff did extensive work on reviewing the computer use policy. And there was discussion about the fact that we didn't have a policy committee at the time to even review the changes that we recommended. But the managers and I would say that is the one that we are most able to move forward with recommending changes at this time. But the committee themselves talked in general about areas that need clarification and did not make specific recommendations for policy updates. Rather, the necessity of having clear policies and trained staff who know what those policies are.
Okay.
Let's
move this back to the other section.
Yeah, I think, Jenny, when we met about this in special topics, it was more identifying these are either very stale or don't even represent what the current landscape is. And we had some examples of other library policies to draw on, but nothing was specifically recommended,
Okay.
at least from the committee standpoint. The staff may have done different.
No, that's very much a good overview of it. I remember some examples without my notes in front of me of the safe child policy, for example. An update that we would recommend is more specific, concrete language that it is the parent or caregiver's responsibility to be responsible for the child in the entire building. And that is actually where this whole interaction happened. It was children that were allowed to be in the library by themselves, so they were 8 or older, but that their caregiver is responsible for what it is that they're doing in the library. And so these individual children viewed the computer screen at a time when they were away from their caregiver. So there's a little bit of language that I would recommend there. But in general, the flip side is we need to be very specific about what our computer use policy is. Our computer use policy currently states that we have filters, but that is not accurate, Matt. You might remember this conversation. So we have antivirus software programs, but we do not filter our adult computer programs. And there's a big conversation in libraries about the right to view. And so there is that kind of that push and pull between, is the library viewed as a safe place? What does safety mean? We are still a public place, and whose responsibility is for the caregiver or for the care of the child, given that it is a public place, given we don't have filters on our computers and we don't receive funding from the state or federal government for filters. I know some school districts and libraries do. That's just kind of scratching the surface of a couple of examples of where there's discrepancy.
And I do think we landed specifically on that topic with regard to filtering, where we will have some base level of filtering. Just that anything really kind of comprehensive has its own problems, because if you start to talk about human anatomy, for example, there may be a lot of things that are undefined or over time fall into different categories. But the explicit things like bomb making and pornography and stuff like that, we can and should filter out.
And I do have a list from CBI, and when we get to this review of the policy of specific things that are filtered, it's not, we do have some level of language and words and phrases that are filtered. And I remember sharing that list with the Special Topics Committee, and I would do so again with this group. But it is a very, very broad, open, and in some cases, the filters are more spam related. They're more about, limiting access to new websites because of the risk that could happen when users on our public computers actually go to these new websites. And I would give a very thorough overview of that when we get to that policy. And even the word filter means different things to different people. So is that even the right nomenclature to use? Other discussion, reflection about the policies listed here, or building off of any responses that Matt gave already.
In terms of how we want to tackle these, we'll get through these first two tonight, and then what is the process for making these effective?
The two for tonight, or all of them in general?
No, I'm just trying to think back into a sort of a timeline or work back schedule. Like, for example, if we go through these tonight, we have some edits or additions, then what happens, and does it ultimately go to the board? Yeah.
Yes, and so referencing the memos, what I did is I put next step section, and so in that I talk about that if this group wants to make recommended edits, that draft, that edited draft could go to the board next week, or this committee could wait to postpone until another further discussion next month or whenever we end up meeting next. But this committee, just in general, the policies that you will receive on this committee will be draft, of course, from library staff or myself or both of our groups together. The recommendation draft comes to you all for discussion, review, edits, and then when you get to a point of finding a policy that you feel comfortable recommending for approval for the whole board, that policy goes for discussion for the whole board. The chair would provide an update or an overview of this policy, the work of the committee, the whys of the changes if there were any, and then that would go for discussion and a vote. And then if approved, it would be updated on our website, in our communication.
So
As far
we're
as
not-
this, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jen.
Oh, no, I was gonna say, so we're not helping you to research like any of
You
these.
can, you
or-
absolutely
Okay.
can. And so it's been my experience where the majority of the research is often by the library staff, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be. I think in the case of previous research that you all did on the technology committee, when we get to the technology ones, Matt and Jenny and others will have a lot of helpful information that they've received when they did a technology survey of other libraries. So that research is always welcome. You all are always able to bring in your own research to the discussion. The draft can start with the library, but it doesn't necessarily have to. For example, if you all see another policy, another library, and would like to recommend it to the committee to say, we need this policy because of this reason, maybe you and I might talk first and then we'll bring it to the committee, and then, the recommendation could go to staff for feedback and back and forth.
That's great. Yeah, no, because I mean, I just want to see how we can help you guys so that you don't have to do all of it yourselves.
It's
If
been
we-
my experience, it's pretty common for the library to do that though, because we're the ones having to interpret the policy and then having to create procedures that support the policy. At the
Okay.
same time though, that's why you all have generously agreed to be on this committee to support the process. So, and it may depend on the policy.
Right.
Public comment policy, when we get to that discussion, that's a policy that I recognize we needed desperately. And I drafted it and am bringing it to your discussion, but it doesn't have to be that way for every policy.
For the policies that were discussed, but maybe not yet edited and approved, so things like the computer use policy after the fall, is there a place where staff feedback has been already collected, even if it hasn't been reflected in the policy yet?
It's a great question. We don't have something like Microsoft Teams or Office 365 where we have kind of a cloud-based software program that allows us to have, people interact with a document at the same time. But we also struggle as an organization. We have struggled as an organization with keeping proper records of the most up-to-date policy. And my understanding is that the website is the place for the most up-to-date policy. Our saving and storage and file sharing and file management processes are not what I would like to see. So also in the first 6 months, we've been relatively understaffed. The trustees will remember there was a resignation on my first day. These first 6 months have been a lot of focus on building. So because we didn't even have a policy committee standing, the staff and I really haven't focused on anything else but the meeting room policy. So that's the one that I have the most up-to-date feedback on. I have a document myself of where, the managers and I updated the computer use policy to where we'd like to see it, but that work's not done. Those are the only two that I would say I have kind of like a document where staff feedback is, even though it hasn't been integrated yet. And if the committee would like it to be, I'd be happy to look for a way to share with you all, kind of, create transparency of that process so that you can see a document of the policy, where we're working at it, how far along we're getting, if that's kind of where you're going, Ally.
Yes, I think that, and just making sure that if any feedback from staff, like you said, who are implementing these things is reflected. Is that a place we can support with the policy tracker? I know you said there isn't necessarily a system in place for sharing documents. Is that because you don't have the capability toward it? It just hasn't been part of the process in the past.
I mean, we could, we have a share drive that all of us have file management access to. I was more or less thinking like something like Google Docs. Staff do not have Google email addresses. We use Microsoft Office, and our version of Office and Outlook is older. Matt's heard my interest in wanting to, move us up to 365 and have Teams and some sort of online platform for regular discussion and work, where we can share it in a real-time way without having to send documents back and forth and edits back and forth. We just don't have that right now.
Like a SharePoint site is what, like your.
We do not have SharePoint.
Okay. I was just thinking for my own edification, I was going through and doing my own, version of that. And if there's a way that we can support with that in the meantime.
I'm very open to any ideas there. We are right now budgeting for Office 365 just on the staff computers. And I realize we're kind of bleeding into technology a little bit, but we are just now budgeting 365 just for the staff computers. And it looks like the patron 365 will have to wait until the next fiscal year, unless we decide to utilize some of our fund balance and reserves to pay for that.
Okay.
So Matt, we'll be talking about that very soon after we schedule that meeting.
Yeah, and just thinking out loud, this can be part of the next technology committee agenda, because even with, Outlook or library domain emails, we can still register on Google Suite. So that might be a cost-effective way for us to go about this, but that's not for here.
I think, yeah, let's talk more about that, Matt. The other piece of this is that we currently have Google Calendar, and unfortunately, Google is not as a secure platform as something like Microsoft Office when it comes to, or Outlook when it comes to the fact that we need, our email to be at a level of security and privacy for our policy, but also when we are getting requests through FOIA. There's more stability and security in a product like Outlook, but anyway, yes, lots of good work ahead. I'm not going anywhere. Just connecting us back to the discussion of prioritization of policy review. Maybe we don't decide right now. I think this is a good initial just discussion so you all can hear from me where the library is standing in terms of our policy. In general, what I'd like to see is a schedule of which policies are reviewed in which years, and then have that schedule rotate year to year. My experience has been it's often, anywhere from 2 to 4 policies a year. The board is committed to reviewing, and the committee is committed to reviewing and updating a year. And then the next fiscal year, moving on to another 2 to 4. And then over time, that schedule rotates so that we have the most up-to-date policy, and we're not in a position where we have to react or be reactive with our policy if a situation comes up. Anything else before we move on?
I agree with Matt's points about the those 4 policies being priorities.
And again, Matt was discussing this one. And this one. Am I right, Matt? These are the 4?
Yes, yep.
Jenny, do you have any feedback at this time?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm certainly writing that down, and I know it'll be captured in the notes too, but what we can do at the, you know, Allie, you and I can talk at the next board meeting in June where there'll be a report out of this committee. You know, I don't necessarily know if you all want to vote at the next committee meeting to officially make these next 4 our priority. You know, you may benefit from reflecting on it, whatever you end up wanting to do. But you could decide to share with the rest of the board that these are the 4 that some of the committee feels is very important to move on to next. So just providing some options there for you. Okay. Well, thank you all. A lot of good work ahead. Okay. Moving on to the next item in our agenda. I want to present, well, first the memo, and I'll just provide a brief overview of the public comment policy draft. There have been many situations in the news at school board meetings, at public library meetings, where government institutions, public institutions are seeing more people come to their board meetings, more engagement, more desire to share feedback and ask questions, just at a much higher rate than has been seen in the last 10 to 15 years. Our library doesn't currently have a public comment policy. And in my experience in the first 6 months here in this position, I've observed a couple of public comments, and I think the board as an entity would really benefit from having a process that they can follow to understand what they can say, what they should say, what they're allowed not to say. And in all my research at the different libraries and their policies, it's very clear in terms of like the time of day, the amount of time that a public member can speak, when they can speak, and how their information is captured, either in the sign-up sheet or in the minutes. I think this is an area where we've been really lucky that nothing has happened yet. I think it's imperative we adopt something as soon as we can. And so my research was a variety of libraries, as well as research through American Library Association, through Rails and their trainings that they offer. I also referenced Illinois County's Risk Management Reference Guide, just highlighting some specific situations that have happened in the state where trustees were caught in violation of Open Meetings Act. The public has a right to communicate with the board as you all are elected officials, and I think having a very structured process where everyone understands the expectation is something I'd really be in support of. So that is really kind of the memo that I wanted to present to you today before we go into the policy. And as before, I just kind of outlined if there are any changes that we want to make tonight, or if you decide you want to consider for longer, we could potentially go another month without the policy. It's up to this committee's decision, you know, and weighing the risks of that depending on how much work you want to do via email between now and the board packet time. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the process that I that I did, or about the policy in general, or the need of the policy, or just if you all want to share any feedback or reflections before we get into your review of the policy. I see Matt shaking his head no.
Well, the only comment I was going to make actually is in reviewing both of these, I feel that we can, subject to the other committee members' input, that we can look to move these forward to the general board next week and at least get some traction early on here and then start to count into the other 7.
Thank you, Matt. Allie, Jenny?
The only note I made, which is so nitpicky, but is the way that the public comment can be submitted. The third one was the submission in writing, and it was a submission sent by 4:30 p.m. on the date of the meeting. Should we revise that to received by 4:30 p.m.? Because we also have email as a separate. So there's in person as an email sent by 4:30 and then a submission through writing sent by 4:30. But if we're thinking of
Letters.
accommodating those who might, send a letter, that we just make sure that reflects.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a close reading. I appreciate that. And that's what this committee is all about.
It's very nitpicky, but
yes, no, that's what we need to do. Thank you. I have a printout, so I'm going to be taking notes here.
okay.
And then, okay, one second. Had this in order on my desk, and I this here for what reason? Writing received. Bye. Thanks, Allie.
Mhm.
So we just jumped into reviewing the policy, and so I just want to highlight that I forgot to change the header. So that's a change that I need to make. This needs to say public comment policy.
Renee, I just had just 2 suggestions, or I had 1 suggestion and a question. On Lake Forest, in Lake Forest's board meetings policy, they have like a nice paragraph that goes in between the Meetings Act explanation and between the individuals attending, and it just says the Board of Trustees welcomes public participation. I just thought it was a nice way to kind of introduce the policy.
I'm
So we
just
do-
pulling it up really quick so we can reference it. Okay, and it's public comments. Okay, so
It's
just
like the
this
3rd paragraph. Oh, wait, no, oh yeah, sorry. The Board of Trustees welcomes public participation. It's just, I thought that was nice.
I saw that in a couple other policies as well. Thoughts from the committee?
I think
I
that
could-
seems in alignment with the kind of values and spirit of public participation.
Thanks, Allie.
Yeah, I'd concur.
Okay.
And then Renee, the only other question I had is, it looks like some libraries said 3 minutes and some libraries said 5. I
Yep.
just was curious what the difference is.
Well, that again is up to the committee. A lot of that has to do, I think, in their developing it. How frequently do they have public comment? How big is their community, the size of their population? Maybe the libraries that I saw had 3 minutes, Northbrook, Oak Park. These are much larger libraries than ours. In my recommendation, I believe I put 5. Because historically, even though we didn't have a policy or procedure, we've said 5 to the people that have commented. And I do know that I was just thinking about the culture of Lake Bluff and the spirit of dialogue and how that's actually named in our values. It's really a judgment call to you all if that's an amount of time that you're comfortable with, 5 minutes. But the group could decide to change it to 3 as well.
My only thought is that 5 minutes can be kind of long for people to speak. I mean, probably most people don't use that, but
they don't have to use their whole time.
right.
So that's not a requirement. I remember our most recent public commenter, he didn't use the whole 5 minutes. I remember that.
Yeah.
but I think in previous public comments, because we didn't have this structure, it turned into a dialogue when maybe it shouldn't have.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, and I'm
I
just
d-
thinking, oh, sorry, I'm just thinking
No,
of
go
like
ahead.
school board meetings where you have a very hot topic and you have, I mean, we haven't had that in the past, but you never know. And if you have a number of people that want to speak, 5 minutes can be long. But that's just my suggestion. But either one, I mean, it looks like both of them are fine. Sorry, Ellie, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I think one, I mean, just as a point of comparison, District 115, which is Lake Forest High School, has two separate public comment sections in their board meetings. There's a first public comment and then at the very end, and they can have 3 minutes and speak at both if they'd like, but the first is reserved only for items on the agenda for discussion that night. And then the one at the end is for non-agenda items. So people can speak up to 6 minutes. I don't think 2 sections is necessary. Some feedback people have given that board is that it feels as if they are trying to limit public participation sometimes in wading through a full board meeting. I don't believe that's the spirit or the intent in any way. But just as a point of comparison, that I think similar timing, but with like 2 different opportunities for public participation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think 5 is generous. I do like that there's a note about a maximum of 30 minutes for public comment in total for the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Matt?
I think 5, because I believe the meeting prior, when we had the computer issue, that attendee went over the limit, and so we kind of limited that to 5 minutes. So I think that's been our practice. I'm indifferent between 3 and 5 minutes, whichever collectively we decide is fine by me. I do want to revisit that wording though. I think we should change, I'd recommend we change that to just strike will ordinarily and just say public comments will be limited to 5 minutes. And at the discretion of the president, they can be modified. And so there's no subject to interpretation there and what ordinary means. Otherwise, yeah, I'm indifferent between 3 and 5.
Okay, so just to confirm, I'm hearing public comments will be limited to up to 5 minutes, or how do you want that phrased?
I would just say limited to, yeah, just limited to.
5 minutes at the discretion.
Well, you already have the discussion part in here. You have the speaker, you can just leave it as is after that, because the president will have the discretion to modify as well as limit repetitive comments. So that gives the president the latitude, yeah.
Just remove
So you're
the
just
word
suggesting to
ordinarily.
remove that sentence in between?
Yeah, just will ordinarily. I would just say public comments will be
okay.
limited to 5 minutes. Yeah, just strike those 2 words.
Sorry, I misunderstood. So keep this sentence as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm looking at my screen. Yeah, I would keep everything. And I apologize, my allergies are stuff I sound.
No,
Particularly like
Matt,
Darth
we'll have
Vader.
to talk
Yeah.
about that. This summer has been really awful for me. It's for a lot of people. Allergies are awful. Okay. Thank you. Comments on that, support of that change?
Agreed.
Yes, sounds good.
Thank you. So I'll scroll back up to the top here for your review.
I had one other, I think it's the last bullet, penultimate bullet here. It's the last one. So speaker's name, can we also, can we add residency along with name so that we know if we're talking to someone who's within our community or outside our community?
So that's actually where I will be specific in asking our lawyer when he reviews this policy, if it's okay. I was especially interested in this item in the reference guide because they said no to someone who was going to be giving public comment who wasn't a resident. But what you're asking, Matt, is could we even just ask?
Just state it, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm saying limited, yeah.
And in my research, my understanding is you can ask, but you can't require. So I'm going to put that, we can put that in, but we'll make that a highlighted question for the lawyers if this is allowable. I mean, they're going to review the whole policy. So with that,
It is listed as bullet 4 where it has
yes,
okay, so it sounds like the question would be, Matt, for the speaker's name and summary of their comment as official public record to include not their exact address, but their community in the minutes. Is that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed the address part. I missed that entirely. Never mind. That kind of makes it moot, doesn't it?
Well, not necessarily if you think it should be recorded in the minutes as such, like if the board did say, okay, where, provide your address and someone said, I live in Lake Bluff, if we include that in the minutes or not. I think it's as like public record. So I guess if it is okay to request an address but not require it, then is that noted in the minutes for people to access?
and that's why I didn't put
Yeah.
the residency in this bullet down here. I just included a summary of their comment, but that could, there's flexibility in policy that could include their residency if you want, if that's shared. It doesn't say that it can't, but it doesn't require it to be the way that it's currently written. The residency piece as part of the summary. So just reflecting back on this, do we, we're still okay with this sentence? The board may request but will not require a speaker to provide their address.
Yeah.
And then would you like to add a phrase like the speaker's name, resident status, or something like that, or just keep as is here for what's going to be in the minutes as public record?
I don't have a strong opinion there. I see Ally's point, and that would be helpful to have for the public record. At the same time, I was looking at it as if we get someone, just thinking the illogical extreme, who takes the metro and walks down the street, joins our meeting, is not even remotely from around here and wants to speak their political agenda, then the president has the wherewithal at that point just to cut them off. That might, so I don't think there's any harm in adding it to the record. I just hadn't even considered that.
Yeah, I think just thinking about it in terms of, it would be, Alexandra Friedeman of Lake Bluff, and then the summary of their content. To your point, Renee, may be flexible to interpret that as listing their community.
Yeah.
Not address, but.
So do we say something as simple as the speaker's name, city of residence, and summary of their comment?
City of residence if shared.
Sure.
Open to
If
suggestion.
provided, if provided. Is that along the lines of what you're thinking, Ally?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just like to your point, someone is, reading minutes after the fact, and there is something incredibly inflammatory, and then you read that they're coming in from Indiana or whatever. That there is, I think that does provide context.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good discussion. And just to clarify, Matt, according to state statute, the director or not director, the president wouldn't be able to cut that person off even if they weren't a resident. That was why I included that paragraph. So I didn't know if that was what you were citing as an example.
No, I was saying more that the public comments will be limited to 5 minutes, but the president reserves the right to modify that limit, as well as limit repetitive comments, not having nothing to do with where they're
right
from.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Rather how caustic they're being or inflammatory. I like that word.
So to confirm or to summarize, we're going to change this bullet to the speaker's name, comma, city of residence if provided, comma, and summary of their comment will be included, ...
Yep.
Great discussion. Jenny, do you have any feedback thoughts on this change?
Good to me.
Any other discussions needed to be had or additional edits or changes?
Nope.
Allie, anything, or Jenny?
No.
Okay, so we have a kind of a decision point at this time. The committee could choose to make a motion to approve the policy as amended to recommend to the board for the June board meeting. So that's one option. You could continue to reflect on this and we could come back to this later. Does anyone have any preference about next steps?
I'll motion to approve as amended and forward to the board.
I second.
Okay, so this will be a roll call vote since it is policy. Trustee Graziano,
Aye.
Trustee Friedeman,
Aye.
Trustee Zaute.
Aye.
Okay. The policy as amended is approved by the Bylaws and Policy Committee. And it will move forward to the full Board of Trustees for final approval and review at the June board meeting next week. Thank you all. First policy done.
1 down, 8 to go.
Yeah.
Agreed. Okay. Yes, and please let me know. This is my first time working with you all to do this work. If the memos are helpful, if the context that it provided, if you have any suggestions about the process in which we're moving forward, please let me know. I'm very open to changing or providing whatever it is that you all need as a committee to do the work of the committee.
Renee?
I will say that I love the research, the memo with the research you included, because if there is any sort of pushback on policy enforcement, I think it's really helpful to have that kind of information readily available. So thank you for doing that work.
Great, thank you. I will continue doing that. And with that, I just have to give huge kudos to library school student, non-librarian, yet our adult programming coordinator, Anna Fifhouse, who took the lead on this process of the meeting room policy draft. She led all of the meetings. She did all of the pre-research, identifying where the issues were, because she was the one that was implementing and interpreting the policy. She was the one who came to me in my early weeks in the position, identifying where we ran into issues with requests for the meeting room that did not necessarily align with practice and didn't necessarily align with policy. There was a huge discrepancy. So moving on to the next item of the agenda, what you see before you is the memo I submitted for the meeting room policy draft. This one has been edited and worked on for several months. We've just been waiting for tonight, I will tell you, with this. What I really appreciate is that we had such a strong team to do this work and to discuss all of the various situations that have come up historically at this library when requesting meeting rooms, and applying it to the research that she has done, that she gave and shared with all of us. We had copies of every policy throughout our discussion. And we always came back to this discussion of what is the role of the Lake Bluff Public Library meeting room, and considering what our needs are in the community, what our opportunities are in promoting this free public space, what are our limitations in managing this room and in managing the library? What are our different various conflicting needs in the community for this meeting room? What are our peers doing, and ultimately what is best for our library and our community? And so, you know, there are very few free public spaces in Lake Bluff to meet. And the meeting room that we have, which is called the Spruce Room, is on the lower level of the library, and that is available by reservation. And so the work of this team was to make changes and review every line of this policy in a way that more effectively scopes the purpose of the room to our individual needs. The current policy is on our library website if you wanted to reference back and forth the two different ones. The one that I will be sharing my screen in a minute, that is what we are proposing. It has seen many rounds of edits. Ultimately, though, I wanted to highlight for this committee the highlights of the major changes. We needed to clarify very specifically the scope of the room being available by groups, for groups that are not going to assume or request or have it be a part of their practice any sort of monetary exchange. And this is pretty standard in public libraries. The room needs to be free and open to the public, and the people who use the room, the purpose of the room should be for free and open business. So that means interactions with, we had a recent group, an investment group that wanted to use this our meeting room for their group. But of course, this investment group required an amount of money in order to participate, in order to be a member of the group. So it was not a free and open group. Another example is tutoring, and I'd imagine there's going to be discussion there. How does the library support tutoring in the library? We are a place for learning and engagement. We have tutors coming into the library all of the time. We recognize that we have wireless, and people could come to the library with their laptops to do business of their own company in the library, you know, because we offer free Wi-Fi. Do we want to have the meeting room be a place for business exchange? And one of the types of businesses that are often requested at the library for these meeting rooms is tutoring. And so I imagine there'll be discussion there. We also see people reserving the space who want to use it just themselves. And truthfully, in my mind and in the scope of the original policy, this is a group meeting room. And so to reserve the meeting room for one person to take a Zoom call, it limits access for actual groups in the community that might benefit from a public meeting space for their group. And it just is not necessarily the function of the room. And so that's an overview of what we try to do, use that lens and make every change thinking through that lens. But also there was just a lot of procedure that did not need to be in the policy. So a lot of that was removed. Procedure can change over time if we get a new software program for managing our online reservations. It does not need to be in the policy. The policy should relate to guidelines and restrictions and scoping the use of the room. The format was changed. I think it's a little bit more readable and easy to understand. Another change that was made was no longer having the youth activity room as reservable by the public. Currently, both the Spruce Room and the youth activity room are available to reserve by the public. However, we have a conflicting policy, our Safe Child policy, that says that no unattended adult should be in the children's department. What that means is an adult, unless they are actively using the collection and checking out books for their child or their child they're babysitting, what have you, it's an important part of a public library to ensure that adults unattended adults are not in the children's department. And so by opening the youth activity room for reservation for adult groups, that goes against the policy that we currently have standing, and it puts, I think it puts our youth services space at risk. And also the room is not equipped with the technology that we need, because we do make available technology for people who reserve the room. And then the other big thing that I'll mention before opening it up for discussion is this conversation about residency and what does, you know, because we have people who are living in Lake Bluff with the zip code of Lake Bluff, we have people with the zip code of Lake Bluff, but their city is Knollwood. And what is the role of the library making the library available, the meeting room available? We regularly have residents from Lake Forest and neighboring communities wanting to use our meeting room while they have access to the meeting room at their home library. And a way around that traditionally has been, there's a member of the book group from Lake Bluff, and they're the ones who make the room reservation. Under this policy, that would still be allowable because there's at least one Lake Bluff resident who is among that group. But in some cases, they try and get around that policy by saying, I'll have my friend make the reservation, but they won't be in attendance. So that is another aspect of that. So with that, I'm going to open it up for discussion. The highlights of the other changes are here. So the same goes for this policy. We'll discuss and make edits. Any questions about the process or some of the decisions that we made in terms of our recommendations before I move on to the policy itself?
I have a clarifying question. So the example you gave around the investment group. So let's say if it were hypothetically the Shriners, and the Shriners, because it's a members only organization, but they wanted to come in and have an event where they talked about their charitable causes and involvement in the community with the community. Could they do that?
So that's a really good question. And those are exact, hold on one second. What?
Maybe grab it.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Sorry. Passport activity always happens. And I have file folders and storage where all those passport documents are locked in my office. So there were people coming in. Sorry about that. It's a really good example of a situation that comes up often. There should be no solicitation in the meeting and during the event. And the program itself, if they chose to host it, needs to be free and open to the public. So the group itself is, you know, members only. Is there a fee associated with it? I'm assuming perhaps. Knowing that the program itself could be free and open to the public and really just informational, that would be allowable under our meeting room policy. And these are some of the conversations that I have had with Anna, Martha, Katie, our managers, when these requests come through. How do we interpret this policy with this specific situation? Are members of the public being pressured to pay money in the middle of the program? Is this something they could lean into if they wanted or not? And I do want to clarify a section in the policy. I'm just going to go ahead and share it since we're talking directly about it. And actually, I have to pull it up here. Public comment meeting room. So I need to have it in front of me. Okay. What you're talking about is down here. Here. So I'm not as familiar as maybe I should be with Shriners. Are they a fundraising group?
I'm not sure. I was just trying. I just picked them from the parade as someone who I know is, I believe, is a private organization, if it's a fraternal organization or what have you, but at the same time has a lot of charitable community outreach. So if, you know, yeah. So I think what we're gleaning from this is if they wanted to have their own meeting for their Shriners board, that's out of the question. If they wanted to have a recruitment event for the Shriners, that's out of the question. But if they wanted to talk about a children's charity they worked with and the benefits that that provides to disadvantaged kids, that would be fine, as long as it was educating the broader community. Yeah.
Oftentimes what happens is that we receive an application and it's very minimally filled out. And then there's a back and forth of a lot of questions to the organization to try and parse this stuff out. So if there's an event, what does the event look like? What are they saying? What are they actually telling the community in this event? We ask those types of questions to really make sure that the event would be free, open to the public, and not a way for them to do fundraising. So if it was informational, again, that's like really on the line, but yes, we would lean to saying yes in that very specific situation.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Renee, I had some questions about this one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I didn't, when you refer to the nonprofit organizations, so are individual like book club groups and stuff, when I think of like a nonprofit, I think of a company, like I don't know how, so
501c3.
Yes, there you go. That's what I was looking for. So it makes me think that individuals are not, for example, a few years ago, there was a group that used to have like a cooking, like a cooking exchange in that room. So is that not available anymore? Because it makes me think individuals are not using the room. It's not open to them.
Well, I would just ask more questions. So nonprofit, in my research, the way that it has been used is both in the legal sense and the tax and the way that that organization is actually filing their taxes, but also that word is used a little bit more generally to say, is this a group that does not profit from members and their members getting together? So what you're describing is a cooking group. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it was like a book club group.
Did they have monthly dues? Was there payment?
No, it was actually, I mean, it was a library sponsored program. So
Library sponsor programs are allowed, of course.
And then I know a friend of mine asked to like have like a Pokemon exchange at the library a year ago. So my question is are like, can individuals like Lake Bluff community, or is this only for organizations? Because that's what makes me think of when you say nonprofit organizations. I don't know if I'm asking my question.
No, I think I understand now. So you're wondering if like even like a club, a non-official club who is, has nothing to do with filing their taxes as a 501c3, if they can use this room for the purposes of their club.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I actually think that we have not done a good job marketing our space as the resource that it truly is to groups in the community. And a lot of the reason why is I think there have been concerns with staff about the policy in the past. So like maybe what you're asking is
I'm more just asking about like wording. Could you say like nonprofit organizations and individuals, or
the question I would think about is, and maybe it's just the word groups, maybe we add the word groups, because individuals makes it seem like I'm taking a Zoom meeting, I'm gonna meet there, or I need to do my homework. That's another thing we get. Someone's just looking for a quiet space in the library. We are limited with study space in the library, but then they see this room, nobody's using it. There's no reservation, they just walk in and use it. That is a current practice that happens. And so it wouldn't be available for people to just walk in and use as a study space. But if the library said, we're going to have an after school study club where we're providing snacks for teens during finals week, and we just put out a bunch of tables and say, you can come in here and study, that is okay. So they don't need to be an official 501c3 in order to use it. So maybe the language could be something like,
I liked your use of groups.
Yeah.
I thought that was nice.
So Spruce Room is used primarily for library meetings, but may be used by community groups and local nonprofit organizations.
Yeah.
For the above specified purposes. I want to get everyone's opinion about that phrasing. nonprofit organizations is more specific than community groups. Like community groups cast a really wide net in its nomenclature, and nonprofits is more specific with regards to the purpose of the group. But I hear what you're saying. We have kind of a gap in identifying the audience, that it could be clubs, it can be something non-official.
Well, could we constrain the community groups by just saying non-commercial community groups? And so that gets away from any sort of barter transaction membership group that, you know, is just limited to like the chess club or the calculus club or what have you.
Other thoughts? Allie, Jenny, what do you think of that suggestion?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Yeah, and then it goes on to say in the next sentence, the Spruce Room is available on equal terms to all groups in the community.
Yeah.
So that just kind of enhances or hits home a little bit harder what we're going to add here. So the addition or the edit is, comma, but may be used by non-commercial community groups and local nonprofit organizations for the above specified purposes. ...
Works.
Good change.
Sounds-
Okay, other questions, edits for discussion?
I have another question.
Yeah.
Can you serve food in the Spruce Room?
So what we're saying is, where does it go? Okay. We're not saying it's not allowed because we have people who bring in food all the time. The library's policy, this is another inconsistency. The library's policy says no food in the library. I think that's a challenging policy to have in its current day and age. People need food for regulation throughout their day. There are a variety of reasons why teens are studying for 6 hours on end and they need to eat something. This is a room that does have a garbage can, but we have specified that there are no facilities for cooking or dishwashing. So the committee can decide to add that as a guideline that food can be served, or we could choose not to address it because it does currently conflict with our library conduct policy.
But I also feel like we do serve food in there, so I feel like you
I know. Well, so
Right.
for library sponsored programs,
right.
oh, come in. Bonnie's here to sign checks, everybody.
Hi, Bonnie.
Hello. Everyone's saying hi. We're meeting for the policy committee. Yeah, no, it's okay. She says hi. Here are the checks. Thank you so much. It doesn't matter. Sounds good. Okay. Yes, sorry, everybody. Just, juggling all the balls in the air. Can you remind me again, you were saying that, but we do serve food there. So there is a precedent, and we absolutely do. And we will, for example, for the Stro event, the Stro Room celebration, there will be food in the outer part of the library. For library sponsored events, we can choose to offer food. So I think the question that you're presenting is, do we add something to the policy that says food is okay, or do we want to just not address it?
I would recommend not addressing it since there's an inconsistency with the overall library policy and just leaving it as it's stated right now, where you can bring outside, the implied here is you can bring outside food in, you're just not going to be able to prepare it or clean up afterwards outside of removing your garbage.
That is the implication that we're trying to communicate, that, cookies from Heinemann's can be fine. A pizza and tacos, if you can fit it in the garbage can, but to bring a 7-course meal is not something that is allowed. Do you think that's sufficient, Jenny? Is there more discussion that you think would be better suited for the policy? or other edits to the policy that would be better suited for what you're saying?
Well, you know what, I just found in another policy that I looked at, this is from the Chicago Public Library. They have on their list is just light refreshments may be served. However, no alcohol is permitted.
And the no alcohol is part of,
Your library policy.
correct. So that's some of the redundancy that we removed.
Okay.
Because they have to abide by our current library user policy anyway. And so we were looking for places to hone in on just what the meeting room guidelines are. What do you recommend? Do you recommend any edits, any further edits?
Oh, further edits.
What's to your suggestion?
Oh, no, that's fine. I mean, if the committee feels like it's fine just being left off, that's fine. I think that's fine.
Sally, Matt?
That's fine.
Oh, good.
So the last thing that I found on the Chicago Public Library one, which I thought was really nice, was they kind of gave an overview of your application, what you can expect when you submit your application. And they also allowed the library, if necessary, they put in a kind of an asterisk that if it's necessary to cancel the event, if like a library event comes up, they are allowed to do that.
So our last policy had the application in there, and we opted to, just giving you context, we opted to remove it because we thought that was more procedural than needed. I believe we identify that an application is required.
Right.
Any groups using this booth room will fill out an application to give them a sense of what that would expect, what they would expect. But this gives us the flexibility to adjust the application based on our needs. I believe that perhaps the first item in the reservations will be taken according to the following priorities. The library is, in my experience with these types of policies for meeting rooms, the library always has precedent. If there is a situation that comes up that the library needs the room for, it's an uncomfortable conversation, but at any point, we could call the person that has the reservation that says something came up. We need to install new lights. The room is not available at this time anymore. So this list shows that level of priority and puts the library first. So would you be recommending that we put something a little bit more concrete and specific to the one that you saw at CPL?
No, I would just say, I mean, I thought that was nice, but I mean, I'm sure that that's fine. You don't have to specify your procedure in the policy.
And I think this conversation is really good because you all have different knowledge of policies and library use. And so at any point, you could bring these examples to this committee and discussion and make those recommendations to say, you know, it's just a draft from the library, but if you think it could be stronger or more effective if worded differently, that's always welcome in this committee for your own discussions and approval. Thoughts about Jenny's recommendation or Jenny's feedback or other comments about the policy as it is in draft form?
I didn't have any opinion on Jenny's feedback. I'm fine either way with being more specific or leaving it as is. I did have a question about what we offer to the folks who are reserving the library room. So do they have access to our Wi-Fi? I assume there's no AV or other peripherals. Do we allow them to plug into the wall? Do we give them an extension cord? Anything like are those ever issues that we need to get in front of?
So yes, Wi-Fi is accessible for anyone in the building, so they have access to Wi-Fi, free and usable. We specify in the guidelines section, must clean it up when vacated, furniture to be left undisturbed unless arrangements are made. Library staff is responsible for taking down library-owned audiovisual equipment used.
Okay.
On the current application, and I'm going to go there now, Lake Bluff Library meeting room. So what you do as a user, if you want to book the room, currently you review this description, our terms and conditions, and then you click on which room you want to book. I'm answering your question, it's just a roundabout way, Matt. Say you pick the Spruce room and say you pick, Friday, one of these times. So we link directly to our terms and conditions again, our behavior policy. And what we do is ask you for information about your reservation. And one of the questions that we ask is AV related.
Okay.
So we do actually allow the public to use our audio visual equipment. We just had the Friends of the Library fund a brand new audiovisual cart that is lockable, that is that works, that is a lot better usable for our projector and for our screen. So we don't allow the actual computers to be used. We don't provide a laptop. We state very specifically here, library staff will set up equipment and provide assistance, but we're not operating the equipment during the meeting, and we can't, that's not something we can staff, and we're stating right there that we can't do that. But we do allow them to be able to use those things if they need to. Again, it's another aspect of public service that we have a meeting room. We could and have a projector and make that available for people that need to use it for, a group presentation, or they're doing, I helped a group that is a book club that was Zooming in the author from another state. And so I set them up ready to go on Zoom, and then I projected that on the computer. I set up our mics and everything. So this form would need to be changed as well with the policy and some of our new equipment, but that is available to them.
Okay,
So
great. So I think you addressed all those questions.
Okay.
My only other question was around the designation of hazardous. So there was a note about like illegal or hazardous activity. Like, how is hazardous defined? Is it physical, emotional? Like, what kind of safety measures in terms of, and this would definitely need some sort of like legal counsel around some of the free speech stuff that I think has come up in the past, but like if there is a group that reserves it and it's hate speech really, things like that, where how are we defining that boundary?
Well, I can answer some of that right away and say that our user conduct policy addresses some of that. So this is another policy that refers to a policy that needs to be updated, but I'll show you really quickly that current policy. So our user, where are you?
Could
Library.
we just add a reference to that policy then in here? So like where it says hazardous, maybe add in like potentially hazardous or not, like in alignment with the library user conduct policy, and then that allows for whatever is in that policy to stand.
There's actually a checkbox that they have to check to say they agree to the library user conduct policy as part of their application to the meeting room. And I don't know if in your mind that would be sufficient, or we should still add. Thank you, Bonnie. What would you recommend? So this is the library user conduct policy. We've linked twice in that process I showed through Matt. We linked through the website on the information page of the meeting room. And then when you go in to book the room, you see another pop-up of the library user conduct policy, and then they have to submit a check mark to say they read it, and then they submit their name and then the actual reservation request.
I think my only concern would be if you had a group that came in and it turns out that they read it, but they didn't abide by it, right? And then they came back the next month to host their next, like, I don't know, like whatever it might be, that it would allow the library to deny that request based on breach of that user conduct policy.
I think, what does everybody else think? Should we add something in the restrictions or even in the initial paragraph that says the library reserves the right to deny? I'm just adding words here, but a sentence like that.
What, it's something along the lines of the library reserves the right to deny application based on, I don't know, caustic, I don't know, do we have discretion there? Inflammatory?
Or I would just even say, like, if it's not in adherence with the user conduct policy. And then if the user conduct policy has, in it has, there's someone who's using caustic language with library staff, so it opens up some room for that. So I don't think it needs to be too specific, but I would maybe consider adding that so that you're not getting like repeat offenders who are like, yeah, I read it, and then they show up.
So I think that's really well said. So the library reserves the right to decline or deny,
Meeting room use.
I'm sorry, I need to buy speakers for my computer. Could you repeat that again, Allie?
No, I was just saying, the library reserves the right to deny meeting room use to, I would say, like, groups who do not or have not adhered to the user conduct policy.
Who do not comply or adhere. Figure out which word I like better. Adhere to the, or even just say library policies in general. Because it's the wireless, user, it's the wireless policy, it's the user conduct policy. It could be a variety of policies. What do others think about that edit?
I like that. It gives us a wide net too, to say, that no, it's just, that's not going to work here.
Okay, I'm just reading it one more time to make sure I have the correct wording. So the library reserves the right to deny. I need to do this on Adobe next time. Meeting room use for groups who do not comply with library policies.
Yeah.
Okay. So great, a great edit. Other reactions or thoughts about that one? Do we support that one or?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Allie. So any other points of discussion for this policy? Okay. Before I move on to a vote, I do just want to state again that in this particular case, in the memo I described next steps, this could be voted on by this group to approve the policy as amended and recommend to the board at the June meeting. This policy does require procedures to be created, staff training. We need to update our communication materials. We need to update the links on our LibCal online meeting room reservation software. And currently the policy and the procedures allow for reservations to take place up to 4 weeks in advance. So right now we have reservations through mid-July. The policy, if it goes to the board and is voted next week, there might be discussion about when this would be implemented. And so we've already discussed how that would work. and what timing we think would be a good time to implement these changes. We talked about August being a helpful time for a couple of reasons. It's allows us enough time to communicate with some of our more regular patrons who reserve the meeting room if their group no longer adheres to the changes made. We have many, I wouldn't say many, we have several tutors that use the room often. And it gives us a chance to have that one-on-one conversation with them to say, this is the change, this is why we made it. You are always welcome at the library. There are many places you could go in the meantime. And actually they already do. They use the second floor, that big long bar table, the tutors do, to do their work with their students, or the study tables on the first floor. This gives us the time to do that and to prep the communication for that. And then it aligns with the beginning of the new school year. And it gives us time ahead of those reservations even being made, so we can block out the room prior to the implementation of the new procedure. So I wanted to give you that context first to ask if there was any discussion or questions about that. Hearing none, do I have a motion? Is there a motion on the table?
I'll motion to approve the policy as amended to forward to the board next Tuesday.
I'll
Do I have a
second.
second? Okay, Ally second. So this is also a roll call vote. Trustee Graziano,
Aye.
Trustee Zaute,
Aye.
Trustee Friedeman.
Aye.
With that, the ayes have it. The meeting room use policy as amended and discussed in tonight's committee meeting is approved with those discussed changes and will be submitted for final review and discussion at the board meeting on Tuesday. Great, thank you all. Really appreciate that. Two done. And I just really appreciate everyone's commitment and work ahead of time prior to tonight's meeting. Especially these two policies, as I mentioned, are just so important to have updated, and as are all of our policies. So I really look forward to working with this group to do this important work. So thank you. Moving on to the next item of our agenda, but we are close to ending. I have the topic of setting a schedule of standing monthly meetings. This was an idea that Bonnie and I talked about with regards to policy, just because she knew or knows that there's just so much work on policy needed. I also wanted to float the idea with this group, if that was something that this group would be interested in or available to do. Otherwise, we could schedule month-to-month meetings or every other month as we are available. But some groups, may prefer a standing meeting just for consistency's sake and scheduling. So opening the floor to any discussion about that.
Is it possible to set standing meetings and then if they're not necessary, if there isn't something to discuss, to cancel them? Would it be
Yes, and
advised
so
not to do that?
what we are required by Open Meetings Act to post at least 48 hours before. So what we would just want to decide is, prior to the 48 hours before the scheduled meeting, are we going to have the meeting, are we not? And then it wouldn't even so much be a cancel, it would just be not posting the meeting. So committee meetings are not required to list their scheduled dates, like we are with the board meetings. We are required to have a yearly schedule of board meetings on the website as per Open Meetings Act requirement, but committee meetings have a lot more flexibility in scheduling as long as they post the agenda and the post to the public that there is a meeting happening, a public meeting happening. It only is needed 48 hours in advance. So yes, to answer your question. Other thoughts? We can come back to this question if, everyone's schedule is different and it changes all the time. Definitely recognize that. So whatever is best for this group, I'm happy to accommodate.
Renee, are we ready to talk about more policies next month?
Yes.
Oh, you are, okay.
Yes, because the next policy that I can bring to you is the computer use policy. That's the one that we have potentially, well, we do have the most work done. At that point, after that, there might need to be some time for additional research, depending on which policy you all prioritize next. And that could be part of a discussion of a meeting. It could be a discussion now if you want, as part of any other business, but that's a good question to consider when discussing scheduling.
Could we because if we discuss the next policy before the next board meeting, would that be the goal so that we could present it in July?
It
Since
seems
it's
to work
ready to
out
go?
well. I mean, it seemed to work out in this case. I was just really trying to gun for the fact that like we would get these policies at the June meeting. So it's really up to the committee. I know I'm saying that a lot, but if the committee met prior to the Friday before the board meeting, that's when I finish the packet. And then would need to have the drafts and everything figured out to be in the packet for review. It could definitely be possible.
So do you think we could do a doodle poll again for that week? And then we could plan to meet to review that last policy? So
Other thoughts? Doodle poll for the next meeting?
Yep.
Yeah, that's fine.
Let's do it. Sorry, I'm a person who loves puns, and so that just made me laugh. Okay, doodle poll, we'll do that for July. Any vacations or time off that I need to work around for everybody's schedule in July? It'll be after the 4th, let's say.
oh, good.
Would it be for an in-person meeting or virtual for committee?
So this particular committee can continue to meet virtually. I know that I've talked with Jenny just in terms of childcare. Virtual it provides accessibility for different people for different reasons. So we are allowed to continue to meet virtually. And so I think depending on how much advance notice, if there was an in-person meeting, you know, each of you would have the ability to consult your schedules if that was possible. So doodle poll for the next meeting, which will be scheduled sometime after July 4th, but before
So we're probably looking at the week of the 10th, right, before the 18th. Isn't that the
July
next library
14th.
meeting? Yeah.
Yes, so the board meeting would be the 18th of July. And so in order to get the board packet done, if there was any policy to get in there, we'd want to do it, have that done before the 14th. So sometime in that date range, I'll put together a bunch of options for a doodle poll. Does evening seem to be best for this group? Matt, I'm seeing a head nod. Allie, you can make the work. Okay. Jenny, evenings generally okay? Or I know it just depends. I know she's off right now, so she might come back on.
Sorry, evenings, is that what you said?
Yeah, evenings. Can you do evenings?
Yes, evenings are great for me.
Great. And again, thank you all for accommodating tonight's meeting. So I will put together that doodle poll some evening between the 4th and the 14th in the month of July. And then at that meeting, what we can discuss, or what, you know, I'd like to propose that we discuss, and Allie, you and I can meet prior to that, you know, to talk about, you know, just in general, the scope of the committee itself and some of the work ahead of us. So I can send you a one-on-one for the two of us to meet there too, if you're open to it. What we can also discuss is the next policy that we'd like to, as a committee, you'd like to review. And then that will give direction to the committee and staff for everyone to do their research. Okay.
That's good.
All right. With that, any other business that is to come before the committee tonight?
No.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So motion.
Thank you, Matt. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? We are officially adjourned at 8:41 p.m. on June 14th. And thank you all for our inaugural meeting of our Standing Committee of the Bylaws and Policy Committee. So thank you. Staff really appreciate your support in this work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Ally.
Nice to meet you.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, Matt. I should have done that. I totally
No, I was
forgot
at
you
the
were
last
at the
meeting,
first
so-
meeting.
Yeah.
Oh, that is my faux pas. I do apologize. Yes, Ally, Matt, Ally.
No apologies necessary. We will see you all in person on Tuesday.
Yes, see you
Sweet.
all very soon. Thank you all. Have a great night.
Thanks.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.